I'm going to show you how you can begin to very quickly make marks, notice patterns, select some of your favorites, and really start to create your own visual language that will start to inform some of the other work that you create. So this is a quick example of some really small, these are about 3 inches large circles here. And they're just drawn with a simple Sharpie marker. You can use any sort of pen. It doesn't really make a difference. And you can see even in the top corner over here, I began with making just some marks in general. But for these circles, you also can notice that they're imperfect and they're not placed perfectly on the page. The circles themselves aren't perfect. It's really about getting marks on the paper to eliminate that fear of, I have a blank page, I don't know what I'm going to begin with. So I'm going to show you a really quick and simple way that you can begin making these circles and making marks. So this is actually just a top to a candle that I have. You can also use coasters, you can use glasses, you can use a protractor or something if you want to make circles, but I say make this as simple as possible so you can just begin. So you can place this anywhere on the page. It's nice to use one hand to hold it down so it doesn't move. And then you're just going to trace around that shape. And again, they don't have to be perfect. So you notice on the edge, there might be that extra line. So for now, the goal is just to quickly get some circles on the page that we know we're going to use to explore marks. So I'll probably just make one more here just for our purposes. And it may be interesting to notice if it really, if you're noticing this longing that you want the circles to be perfect, that can be an interesting thing to be aware of with yourself. It can be a good thing to kind of push your boundaries. And so perhaps with this first circle, we're just going to begin making any marks. You can even scribble and allow your pen to move across the page as quickly as possible, not really thinking much here, and then notice what is formed and if you find anything interesting in that. So you can begin to embellish. So a lot of this is around the quality of line. So you might notice different shapes. And there's no right or wrong way when we're beginning here. It really is about just getting some marks on the page and building your own vocabulary. So if you are making scribbles, you may want to expand on some of the shapes that you already have down, highlighting, embellishing what some of those shapes are. So I'm basically adding a second loop or layer onto that form that was created. And that's interesting, having this darker line and that lighter line. So from whatever you have in that first circle, you can move on to another circle, and you might pick out one thing, one mark in this that kind of draws your eye, and repeat that in the next pattern. So maybe for me, I'm actually really drawn to this circle. So I'm going to allow that to be the beginning of my next mark making circle. So I think that's interesting with that circle, having these larger lines around. So the goal is really this exercise. You only want to spend about 5 minutes on it total. So from this one, I really like that sort of starburst. So I'm going to start that in this next one here. Just noticing as you're doing this, if you can still be aware of your feet on the ground, perhaps noticing how you're sitting in the chair. Even notice your breath. hearing the sounds that your pen makes as you make your marks. So the great part about this also is you can do this as many times as you need to, especially if you're starting a new project or if you're feeling stuck. It's a really great way of bringing you into the moment, turning off a little piece of that inner critic and getting you started so you're not staring at that blank page. And you might begin to incorporate a few different shapes. So you notice in this one, I'm bringing in some of these wavy lines that I liked, that repeating pattern. It's kind of mirroring between these two. And then I'm also bringing in that element of the circle. So you can also, with this, instead of using one or two items that you're repeating, you can choose an opposite. So a lot of what I have here are very organic and fluid. I do have these strong lines here, but otherwise they're pretty soft, organic shapes. So I might want to explore, what is it like if I have some harder lines? And it can be interesting too, because for you, you got to define what you're seeing and then also what that opposite is. So it can be a fun little mental exercise as well. And then now that you've done one item that's informed the next piece, perhaps drawing in a couple of those items, and now an opposite, you can see what you like out of all of these that perhaps you can start combining. And so that's just a quick example. I went through this a little bit faster because there's only 6 circles here compared to my original that had more. But you can really notice the different quality of shapes and lines. And I encourage you to look at the other references around line art. So looking at that Pinterest board if you are on Pinterest. Also exploring what is it like if you're using regular lines, if you're exploring cross-hatching, if you're using dots. And then if you're not using a Sharpie, you can also explore shading. That's a little bit tricky with using a Sharpie marker. So that's all for now, and enjoy creating some of your circles here, and we'll see you again here soon.